Marissa, the CEO of PragerU, many of you know Marissa, called me a few weeks ago, said, hey, we want you to come down to Phoenix, give a talk. I said, all right, great. What, give me a theme. What are we really discussing at this evening event? She says, I want you to really explain the crisis of young people in America today and how to solve it. I said, all right, great. How long do I have? She says, 20 minutes. I was like, all right. We're going to have to be really tight with this. But it's an important topic. I was once a young man. I still feel like a young man. I have 3 boys and a baby daughter. And it is not an understatement that kids that are under the age of, say, 25 are growing up in a vastly different world than any previous generation, not only in American history, but really in world history. You can play those jokes like my kids don't know what a rotary phone is. I explained to one of my kids who was upset that the internet was out that when I grew up there was no internet. And it was like unbelievable. But there's something happening as well this year that I think we should reflect on. And it's something that has been just kind of churning in my mind for now 3 months. And that was the assassination of our friend Charlie Kirk. I know Charlie was instrumental with, of course, his organization, Turning Point here in Arizona, was a great contributor to PragerU. And in the weeks before his passing, he and I had been working, and he was doing this very quietly behind the scenes. This was a testament to his character. He didn't want any credit. He didn't want it to be made public. I hope you forgive me. I'm going to make it public now. But during the transition, so this is actually now a year ago, he was at Mar-a-Lago and he said, I need names of good people to put in the Department of Education. Get me names. Who can we bring into the department that's actually going to shake it up to change education for the better? This is our one shot. So don't give me the boring think tank people. Give me those courageous fighters that are going to come in and do what needs to get done. And so we were going over names and sending things and recruiting what ended up into being an incredible team at the Department of Education. By the way, their first move was to eliminate half of the department. So I think that's a strong opening. And of course, his tragic death illustrates an important and really terrible dynamic that has overtaken our society. Conservatives who are locked out of most of the sense-making institutions, advertising agencies, television production studios, colleges and universities, prestige magazines in New York City. You know, Charlie said, well, we may not have the universities, but education is important, and I'm just going to set up a little table. We're going to start there. And that little table started drawing bigger and bigger crowds, and his thesis was very simple. It says, I know that we don't have the power that the left does, but we have the right ideas, we have the stronger arguments, we have a winning temperament, and if we go and we talk to people, we can actually win this debate, win this competition of ideas and ideals. But for some, that tiny table on a corner of campus was too much of a threat. And the polling indicates that this wasn't just a fringe phenomenon of some lone nut job, but actually something that is supported and even celebrated by an enormous part of the American left, particularly young people. And so if you read the manifesto of the alleged killer, Tyler Robinson, who was in court just today, he told his transgender furry boyfriend that, sometimes you can't just accept hate. That was the word he used. And so therefore, I'm going to assassinate this popular conservative speaker. The most superficial thing imaginable, hate. There are some people who hate. Charlie Kirk wasn't one of them. I mean, he did everything right, everything by the book. And so for those of us who are in this movement, in this business, in this campaign, the loss of Charlie Kirk has been enormous. And I feel a bit embarrassed to say it, but I didn't quite know how significant he was until he was gone. He was, in fact, the glue that was holding together all of the various constituencies on the right. Getting a conservative coalition is like herding cats. It's actually hard to do. There are a lot of prima donnas. There are a lot of people who hate each other. There's a lot of backstabbing. Now there are kind of psychotic podcasters who are trying to ruin everything. You may have heard of some of these things that are happening. But Charlie, it was, and I think really his genius was to able to figure out, all right, what is the message that can make the biggest group, but also how can the right practice the policy of addition through subtraction? Meaning sometimes a bigger coalition requires you to manage out certain people who are destructive to those core principles or that coalition. Since his death, it's been something of a knife fight. All the various people, knives out, and no one really to put it together. And so I think as we get into this holiday season, Advent for some of us, maybe majority of us, it's worth reflecting on this, and it's worth reflecting in particular about young people. And I'd like to say on both sides, it's very tempting for those of us in conservative politics, conservative like radio hosts excel at this. The left is evil, the left is maniacal, the left is violent, the left wants you dead. Hyperbolic, but largely true. So yes, all right, I will agree with that. But there is a parallel and also perhaps, maybe not equally, but also concerning trend on our side. Young people on our side of the aisle are looking to say, well, Charlie Kirk did everything right, and look what that got him. Maybe we should abandon principle. Maybe we need to do the harder stuff, right? And so there's some radicalization on the right among young people that is moving in tandem or in parallel with the radicalization on the left. And if it's unchecked, I think this causes great problems for all of us, for the country. And so I was in Washington, D.C. I have a lot of friends in Washington, and a lot of younger guys, younger men, look up to me as a reporter, as an activist, as someone who's been successful in my little craft that I've mentored over the years. And I've watched some of them kind of drift into some spicy territory, we could say. And so I invited them to dinner, and I just said, what am I missing? Like, look, I know you, you know me, we can talk openly. I see it, I don't get it. I don't get why the kind of right-wing pessimism, cynicism, fatalism, a kind of burn it all down mentality. Have any of you seen this? Have you seen this creeping around the edges? Maybe you have. And they said something very interesting, and I think I'll get to my point of agreement and disagreement with some of the other, well, actually with my prompt from Marissa. A number of these gentlemen, they said to me, well, think about it from our point of view. When we were in high school or college, depending on the age, COVID happened. Our social life during our most formative years was reduced to zero against all of the evidence, against all of the kind of medical necessity, and for purely political reasons. Destroyed our social life, forced us to retreat into living almost purely through digital means. You said 8 or 9 hours a day on a screen is not good. People don't actually want that. And COVID has a lot to do with that increase. They also said, and then when we got back to school, it was BLM, it was trans ideology, it was radical left-wing activism, and basically for my whole adult life, these gentlemen said, I've been told that I'm evil, I'm irredeemable, I'm a bad person because I'm the white American Christian male, scum of the earth. Then we get out of college and we're looking at some of the stories that I've broken, actually. This was very smart of them, rhetorically, play to my vanity. And then they said, and then as you know, having broken these stories, you really brought DEI to the forefront. You go look for a corporate job and you're a young white guy, you have the sense that you're being put at the back of the list. And you're seeing people advance above you who don't have the same talent. And then on top of that, your last refuge of hope is that you're actually proud to be an American, and you're told that that too is wrong. That this country is a system of oppression, not a system of liberty, equality, freedom, and justice. And then you have, this is a long-standing thing. It's an eternal thing. You can go back to the Greek playwrights. There's the war of the sexes, right? You see, there's actually New Yorker cartoons from the 1920s, the war of the sexes. They're really funny. You should go back and look at them. But what we now have is a thermonuclear war of the sexes. Young men and young women see vastly differently. And many policies, for example, on colleges' campuses have exacerbated the hostility, suspicion, and distrust between young men and young women. The dating market has fallen apart for many young people. You'll see this. You always have heard this, but actually the studies and data indicate that it's a real problem. And then they say, well, then you finally get a job, you're putting your life together, and you want to go buy a house. But Democrats and Republicans have been bankrupting the country for 50 years. We're $40 trillion in debt. Trump and then Biden and then a little bit Trump again have printed so much cash that a starter home somewhere near a good opportunity is $1 million. And so that pathway to the American dream seems to be out of reach. And so how do we confront this, right? And then the left-wing stuff, I'm not even going to talk about it. It's much more disturbing. But the question is, how do we confront this? And I think that there is the question, do you blame society or do you blame yourself? Maybe blame is the wrong word. Do you look to society or do you look to yourself? And while I think, of course, it's most productive always in every case to say, well, what can I do about it? What resources do I have? What agency do I have? What talents do I have? What opportunities can I seize? Because ultimately it's reducible to that. Whatever situation you're in, that's your situation, and no one's going to solve it more than you will. But I think it's not a simple left-right question. And in fact, it's a conservative principle that you want to participate in a tradition, right? Which is simple. It comes from the Latin word meaning to hand down the best, to hand down the truth, to hand down a dream, to hand down opportunity. And so I think we have a generational compact that has maybe broken down. And my sense is that young people need to not just burn it all down. Not a great idea. We tried it in 2020. You guys remember all of the burning and looting and pillaging. Wouldn't recommend it. I don't think that was anything that we should repeat again. I mean, absolute disaster. But I think that those of us who are in politics, in education, in media, in the economy even, have to come up with a better set of answers for young people. And I think it boils down to really three things. You have to give people a sense of the story that they can latch on to, right? Human beings are wired towards stories. That's what the Bible is. That's what the PragerU videos are. That's an immense competition right now in America, and we're vastly outnumbered. If you want to participate in a leftist mythology, set of stories that anchors your values and guides your action, you can look almost anywhere. Universities, major entertainment, prestige magazines. It's all actually very well done too. It's like very compelling as far as aesthetics and production. And on our side, I think we have a lot of work to do, telling the story of our country and also telling the story of who we are, what we value, what we want to accomplish, what we want to pass down to young people. The second is institutions. Conservatives need to build institutions that can provide a script again for Americans. Throughout history, Americans have had a script. It's changed over time. It used to be having a rough time in England, get on a boat, build a cabin, try to survive the winter, and you have freedom. You can go to church, you can write a pamphlet, you could drink a pint. Fast forward, Civil War, we're not going to go through the whole history, but then after World War II, it was what we now think of as the American dream, which is relatively new, right? It's the white picket fence with the house and the 2.5 kids and the washing machine and the Maytag man and the whole deal. I think we need to come up with a new script where young people can participate, because the one they have now seems to be you're not an individual human being with a destiny and a purpose and value to society, but you're a commodity. You're a consumer for cheap drugs, cheap movies, cheap food, cheap pharmaceuticals, cheap housing, et cetera, meaning that young people, I think rightly, feel a sense that the institutions are harvesting them as a resource rather than challenging them towards something higher. And then third, I think, is the question of identity. Conservatives, in my view, make a big mistake when they say, we oppose identity politics. Do you guys oppose identity politics? Yes, all right. I'll tell you why. On the surface, yes, we don't want to have tribal, racial politics, right? I'm from this group, you're from that group, and therefore we're enemies. That is absolutely something we oppose. But I think what's happened is that conservatives have developed a reflexive aversion to identity as such. But therefore we're ceding it to the left. If you want to find a sense of identity, the left has, it's like a supermarket of identities. You can pick from 1,000 genders. You can have any kind of racial acronym you could spell out in the English or non-English language. There's a land acknowledgement for you, maybe in your future. But conservatives should take the question of identity seriously. The problem with Tyler Robinson, the assassin, is that he bought into the left-wing identities that were available to him. Transgender identities, leftist political identities, activist identities. They loaded him with a script, and then they unleashed him into the world. Not in a centralized way, not in a conspiratorial way, most likely, but in a decentralized way, because these are the stories that are penetrating through the minds of young people, right? Radicalized on the internet and then doing real world harms. And so conservatives need to think seriously about all of these. I think PragerU is part of that. These are all stories, right? Teaching Americans to understand themselves, to understand their country, to understand their future in a way that is going to ground them in principle, but also give them a sense of possibility, where to go, something to go upward. And beyond that, I think we also need new institutions and to reform old institutions. I talk with some of the folks in the crowd that are trying to reform a school board, which is very hard to do, but very necessary. Because I think that there are a number of things that can anchor an identity for young people. And if their cell phone becomes the source of their identity, wherever you are, that's going to end poorly. I think that is almost certain. And we need to figure out a way to get young people back into those anchoring institutions. The family, first of all, of course, number one. Religion or a faith tradition, to give them something that is durable, that can withstand some of the pressure from the ideologies of today's world. And then also a sense of that national identity, participation in a cause. And I think that these are not easy questions. They're not going to be solved in a paper or a product or a clever argument on the radio. I think all of those things are necessary. Those are the things that I do, so I'm going to say they're very important. But ultimately, the acid test, the real point of departure, is actually making it meaningful in the real world. And so I would say for older folks, and I'm kind of like ambiguously in the middle here, I'm the mediator between the boomers and the zoomers. I think young people just need a sense that you understand their problems. And once you establish that connection, then you can be the hard ass about it and say, these are the problems. Here's how we're going to work on them. But you can't wait for society to solve all these problems before you get started with your life. And so I talk to parents and no parents, my peers. Kids living at home, 19, 20, 21, starting to get nervous. Like, what are you doing? And so I really think that the message that we heard about, okay, what can I do as an individual, exists most meaningfully when there is a restored connection or compact between generations. And in my sense, again, I'll go back to the young gentleman that I'm talking to in DC. I think we have to figure out how to have a politics that speaks to their concerns without pandering to them. A politics that tries to solve some of the real structural problems. We're not, libertarians here. The government does have a role. Our founders were very clear about this. Like monetary policy even. Like how can we have a sound currency? All of these complex questions that demand real answers. While at the same time demanding of young people that they can step up. And the last thing I would say, one of the most inspiring things for me in the last few years, and actually something that's kind of maybe paradoxical, is that it seems like young blue-collar men in particular have developed some kind of immunity to these problems. Not in every case, there's real problems too, but I'm seeing a lot of young men that are starting businesses that looked at the world of corporate academia, prestige media, said that doesn't seem like a very healthy place for me to be, and are launching businesses, working in the trades, doing an entrepreneurial venture, making really good money, oftentimes more money than the college grads. And so, in talking with a wide range of people, it strikes me that America is still the land of opportunity. If you work hard, if you have some talent, if you don't give up, if you work, 6 days a week when you're just getting started, you can make tremendous strides in this country. And I think we have to celebrate that and expect that. And that starts at the top. And so I'm hoping that this year, and this was really one of Charlie's projects that remains unfinished, which was, let's come up with a political agenda for young people to give them a stake in the country without permitting or excusing these bad ideologies and bad behavior. And so I think that's what PragerU is certainly doing. They are having a huge impact. And, I've known Alan and Marissa and Craig and others for quite a few years now. And it's an amazing thing to see them grow and to see them really step also into the political arena, step off the screen and now into the world. I think it's so important. And so for those of you who are able, I'm so grateful for you to contribute to their great work. And, I think that these problems I remind myself, like I was actually talking to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I can't remember his exactly how to pronounce his name. I don't want to butcher it. And we were talking about our mutual disdain for communists. And then he reminded me of something I didn't know actually, that he actually fought the communists in Vietnam and successfully, eliminated many communists in Vietnam War. And so those are the stories that remind me, okay, young people, you don't have it that bad. You're not getting drafted and sent to Vietnam. And so I just like to say, if you look at American history and you take the long scope of it, these problems are significant. But these problems aren't any more significant than things we've already done. And I think that's who we are. It's who we continue to be. And that's why I think that in time we'll succeed. Thank you.